Have you ever woken up on a seemingly normal day, but did you feel like the world had gone a little dark inside? No bad news, no tragedy, and yet your chest is heavy, your soul is crying, and everything inside you seems out of place. It's as if there is an internal scream but without sound, a faceless, unexplained pain, but deeply real. This is the pain that comes from nowhere. But does it really come from nowhere? Carl Jung believed that there are pains that do not arise because of something external, but because something very deep inside us wants to be born. And this spiritual birth is rarely quiet or comfortable. In fact, it usually begins with what many call a crisis. But for some, it is just the beginning of the truth. There are people who feel more, who carry pains that they don't know where they come from, who seem to live with a heightened sensitivity to what others don't even notice. They are called fragile, intense, dramatic, but perhaps the truest name for them is another chosen, because this silent pain which seems to come out of nowhere is one of the first signs of the soul's calling. And no, you are not alone, not even going crazy. Maybe you're just crossing the threshold between the wounded soul and the awakened soul. And this crossing is not done with maps, but with courage. Courage to feel, to continue, to not give up, and most importantly, courage to listen to this pain until it reveals what it came to teach. Before we go any further on this journey, I want to extend a warm invitation. If this message has already awakened something inside you, if this nameless pain we described seems to echo in your soul, so maybe you too are one of those few who feel what many don't even realize. If you want to walk with us, feel free to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a like. This helps this message reach other hearts that, like yours, carry the invisible in silence. Now take a deep breath, because what follows isn't just a script, it's a mirror, and maybe, for the first time, you'll really see yourself. Have you ever tried to explain what you feel, but couldn't find the words? It's as if there were an open wound inside you, but without blood, without a cut, without a cause. A spiritual pain that doesn't show up in tests, isn't relieved by medication, and that no one around you can see. This is the pain of the chosen, the silent pain that pierces the soul without asking permission. And when it arrives, even the body seems to become confused. Suddenly, your chest tightens for no reason. Your breath becomes shallow. Sleep eludes you. Your heart races even in silence, but there's no trauma, no recent loss, no concrete reason. And that's when many become frightened. They seek help, get tests, and are told everything is fine. But inside, nothing is right, because what the body is feeling is a reflection of something that comes from the soul. Carl Jung called these symptoms of the unconscious. When the psyche wants to say something that the conscious mind hasn't yet understood, it speaks through the body, emotions, dreams, and unexplained anxiety. For the chosen, these symptoms are even more intense because their spiritual sensitivity is more attuned. It's as if they're connected to frequencies most ignore. Pain that comes from nowhere is often the first sign that the spirit is calling. And it doesn't call with flowers. It calls with discomfort, with anguish, with this invisible weight that seems to have no origin. It's not a punishment, it's an invitation to look within. Because while the world teaches us to look outside, the soul's call always points within. And that's why so many people with sensitive souls carry this feeling of being broken. They're not. They're just trying to exist in a world that doesn't understand what they feel. Unexplained pain is often proof that you're alive inside. Feeling is a sign of presence. Feeling too much, in your case, could be the beginning of a spiritual awakening. So if you've been feeling this nameless pain, this fatigue that isn't physical, this sadness that comes without reason, maybe it's not an illness. Maybe it's the beginning of your healing. Inner healing, the transmutation of pain, because those who feel this pain the way you do aren't collapsing. They're in a process. a process of transformation, a process of individuation, a process of returning to their essence. Few pains compare to screaming inside and not being heard. The chosen ones know exactly what this feels like, feeling something within them cry out for attention, for acceptance, for understanding, and receiving only silence in return. It's not the silence of words, but of incomprehension. You speak, and no one understands. You feel, and no one notices. And this abyss is what we call spiritual loneliness. Carl Jung said that the process of individuation begins with separation, and this often means being removed from ordinary emotional life to delve into one's own inner world. It's as if God, or the unconscious, is removing you from the external noise so you can finally hear your soul. And yes, this silence hurts, because while you try to decipher what you feel, the world moves on, distracted, relentless. You start to doubt yourself. You wonder if you're overreacting, or if maybe you're actually going crazy, but you're not. What happens is that the heightened sensitivity of the chosen ones makes them able to pick up on more subtle frequencies, unspoken pain, hidden feelings, invisible energies. And when you live in a world that values logic and disregards intuition, this becomes a burden and isolation. This phase of withdrawal, which feels like abandonment, is actually a time of preparation. You are being taught to hear another language, the language of the soul. And it doesn't speak with words. It speaks with silence. It speaks with anguish. It speaks with dreams. And as uncomfortable as it may be, this period is necessary. It is during this time that you begin to discern what comes from the ego and what comes from the spirit. Many of the great awakened ones have gone through this kind of emotional exile. Carl Jung lived through periods of intense solitude to understand his own symbols and inner visions. Jesus went into the desert, Moses too, and you are being led to your own desert, because only in silence and away from the din can the chosen ones hear the soul's call clearly. So if today you feel disconnected, separated, invisible, it's not because you're being punished, it's because you're being prepared. The pain of spiritual isolation isn't the end of the road. It's the beginning of your alignment with your spiritual mission. And even if no one sees what you feel, God sees it, and so does your soul. Have you ever felt like you're carrying the weight of a lifetime, even when you can barely explain where it comes from, as if the pains in your chest weren't just yours? Carl Jung called this the influence of the collective unconscious, the invisible field where humanity's memories, traumas, and patterns are stored. And among them are also the emotional legacies of your family, legacies you may be trying to heal without even knowing it. For the chosen, this burden comes with a hidden code, the spiritual mission to break cycles, to break patterns, to heal pains that have spanned generations. Therefore, the spiritual pain you feel today may not have begun within you. Perhaps it was passed on in silence, in the glances, in the absences, in the fears of your parents, grandparents, and those who came before. Pains that could not be expressed, but that you, with your spiritual sensitivity, captured. How many times have you felt different within your own family, as if you saw and felt things that others ignored? This is no coincidence. God's chosen ones are like bridges between the past and the future, between what has been silenced and what needs to be transformed. And this bridge often trembles because the process of generational healing is intense. It involves guilt, loyalty, fear, and courage. A lot of courage. Spiritual psychology teaches us that what isn't healed repeats itself. And often, the silent pain you feel today is a reflection of a system that needs to be freed. Therefore, the weight on your soul isn't just yours. It comes with a purpose. You weren't chosen to suffer. You were chosen to transform, to break cycles, release frozen emotions, and give a new direction to stories that seemed doomed to repeat themselves. Carl Jung said that we become whole when we acknowledge what we carry, even that which didn't begin with us. This requires a deep, honest, and loving look at our own lineage. It requires asking, what do I feel that isn't mine, but is within me? And most importantly, what can I do with it? Because rather than continuing the pattern, the chosen are called to purify it. And that's when the pain that comes from nowhere finds meaning. When you understand that you're not just dealing with your own shadow, but with the shadows of many. That your sensitive soul isn't broken, it's awake. That the spiritual suffering you feel is actually a summons to sacred work, the healing of the invisible, and you were not chosen by chance. Sometimes, life seems to be in order. You have a roof over your head, food, maybe even a job, family, some leisure time, and yet something inside you doesn't fit. It's as if there's an internal crack, invisible to the outside world, but impossible to ignore on the inside. Everything seems okay to the outside world, but inside, your soul is screaming for meaning, and this dissonance hurts. It hurts more than any visible pain. Carl Jung called this moment a crisis of meaning. It arises when the ego structure no longer supports what the soul desires to express. It's like living a life that seems right to others, but completely wrong to your spirit. And the chosen ones, with their heightened spiritual sensitivity, realize this before others. They feel emptiness where others feel comfort. They feel restlessness where others see stability. This is why so many chosen ones experience crisis even when everything seems to be going well. Because the divine call doesn't settle for more or less. It comes to awaken, to break out of the comfort zone, to reveal that true happiness isn't in appearance, but in wholeness of the soul. And when this wholeness is absent, an unexplained pain arises, the kind that no one understands, but that you feel. And you feel it deeply. You may be surrounded by people, yet feel alone. You may have a good job, yet feel like you're betraying your spiritual mission. You may be smiling in photos, yet imploding inside. And this isn't weakness. It's a sign of heightened sensitivity. It's your soul warning you that you're living below your truth. Silent pain is the spirit's last resort to call you back to yourself. This feeling of being disconnected from one's purpose is not uncommon among the awakened. It's what separates a life of automaticity from a life of presence. And for the chosen ones, this transition is often painful, intense, and challenging, because it requires breaking what seems to be working to build something more aligned with inner truth. And this, in practice, seems crazy until it becomes clarity. So if everything around you seems stable, but you feel broken inside, maybe that pain is a portal to the awakening of the soul, for reconnecting with your essence, and for a life that more than making sense to others, makes sense to you. And this perhaps is the true emotional healing that your soul has been searching for. Some people feel too much. They sense the atmosphere of a place before even entering. They feel someone's pain just by looking at them. They feel the weight of words that were never said. If you're like this, know this. This isn't weakness, nor drama, nor exaggeration. This is spiritual sensitivity, and according to Carl Jung, this is a clear sign that the collective unconscious is manifesting through you. You feel the world, because perhaps it has come to heal it. The chosen ones carry this strange and, at the same time, painful gift, the gift of deep empathy. They feel the energy of their surroundings, capture hidden emotions, and suffer for others without understanding why. Sometimes they wake up tired for no reason. Other times, they cry for pains that aren't their own, but that have somehow become part of their soul. This is profound spirituality in action, but it's also an invisible weight that few bear. Jung said that certain individuals are like antennas, connected to more subtle layers of reality, and this connection makes them vulnerable, but also necessary, because feeling what no one else feels is often the key to understanding what no one else understands. These spiritual symptoms are invitations to a mission, and the mission of the chosen ones almost always involves carrying and transforming what the world insists on hiding. It's no wonder that many of these chosen ones become therapists, artists, caregivers, spiritual leaders, or silent guides. They don't learn their mission. They feel it, always, even when they still don't know how to name what they feel, even when they're still in deep emotional crisis, and even when all they want is to stop feeling. Because the sensitive soul never shuts down, but you can, yes, learn to transform. This spiritual empathy also brings confusion, because when you feel so much about others, you can forget about yourself. You can carry guilt that isn't yours, pain that doesn't belong to you, responsibilities that didn't come with your name. And that's why the chosen ones need to learn to protect themselves energetically, emotionally, and spiritually. Because a gift without direction becomes suffering. But when you begin to understand that your empathic pain is not a curse, but rather call of the soul, everything changes. The burden becomes a mission. The wound becomes a bridge. And what once seemed like weakness reveals its true strength. Because only those who feel deeply are capable of truly healing. And if you feel the world, it's because the world needs you awake. There is a phase of the spiritual path that almost no one talks about. It is silent, invisible, and often devastating. Carl Jung not only recognized this stage as part of the individuation process, but also lived it intensely. This is called dark night of the soul, a period when everything loses its shine and you feel like you're wandering within yourself, without direction. It's the crossing that separates the old self from the truth that's about to be born. During this dark night, the world seems distant. Old certainties crumble. The answers that once worked no longer serve. You feel disconnected even from God, even from faith itself. It's as if everything is silent, a heavy, dense, almost unbearable silence. But this emptiness isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's the interval between the wounded soul and the awakened soul. Jung would say that this delve into the shadows is necessary for you to find yourself beyond the masks. Because there, without distractions, without applause, without external validation, you discover who you truly are. Not what is expected of you, not what you've built to survive, but what is eternal, sacred, essential. And this revelation rarely comes without pain, because being born spiritually is also childbirth. It's at this stage that many feel on the verge of collapse. They think about giving up. They believe they're failing spiritually. But in reality, they're undergoing one of the greatest rituals of inner transformation that exists. And like every ritual, it requires surrender, courage, and a faith that often needs to be sustained even when feeling nothing. The dark night of the soul is not the end of the light. It's the moment you learn to see in the dark. It's when the eyes of the flesh close, so that the eyes of the spirit can open. It's when the external world falls silent, so that the voice of God, or the self as Jung called it, begins to be heard. And this voice doesn't shout, it whispers. And only those who dive deep are able to hear it. If you're experiencing this moment, know this: you're not lost, you're being shaped. The pain you feel today may be precisely what's removing what no longer serves you. And even if it seems like nothing is happening, everything is. Within you, silently, deeply, with intention. Because the soul, before blossoming, also goes through winter. Perhaps you have already asked yourself silently, why do I feel so much? Why does this happen to me? You may have thought that life is unfair or that there's something wrong with you. But what if it's the other way around? What if the fact that you feel what few others feel is precisely a sign that there's something wrong, right happening inside you? Carl Jung said that the spirit signals reach the most sensitive first, and they rarely come in the form of words. What you feel may have no rational explanation, but it carries a profound spiritual meaning. The chosen ones are not defined by their title, but by the intensity with which they feel life, by the silent pain they carry, by the empathy that almost no one understands, and most importantly, by the constant feeling that there is something to be done, even without knowing exactly what. This is the soul's calling, and it starts in silence. Often, the pain that seems to come from nowhere is just the beginning of a process of spiritual activation. The soul begins to move within, provoking a restlessness that the external world cannot resolve. This is when sensitivity becomes a compass. Discomfort becomes direction, and what seemed like weakness begins to reveal itself as strength. The silent call needs no words because you feel, and feeling is already an answer. Jung believed that the psyche doesn't awaken for no reason. If you're feeling it, it's because you're ready to begin. Not ready in the sense of having all the answers, but ready to stop running. Because once the soul calls, ignoring the call only prolongs the pain. It's not punishment, it's not karma. It's an invitation to remember who you are, beyond the roles, the wounds, and the masks. And no, not everyone hears this call, not everyone feels this pain, because not everyone is prepared to go through this kind of awakening. But you are. That's why you feel, that's why you question, that's why you cry without knowing why. Because within you, something greater is trying to be born. And every new life requires rupture. It requires space. It requires courage to move, even without a map. So, if you feel that something is calling you, even if you don't know what it is, keep feeling, because feeling is already the path. And maybe, just maybe, everything you're going through is God's way, or the universe's way to reach you. With kindness, with pain, with depth, because the chosen ones, before they know they've been called, feel, and that's enough. There comes a time when pain ceases to be an enemy. Not because it's gone, but because you've stopped fighting it. When this happens, something changes. The soul, which once screamed, begins to whisper. The wound, which once hurt you, begins to teach you. And what seemed like the end begins to reveal a new beginning. Carl Jung said that what we resist persists, but what we accept transforms. Accepting pain isn't about conforming. It's about recognizing that it's trying to show you something. It's about stopping running from yourself and starting to listen. It's about looking at the shadow, what you've avoided for so long, and finally embracing it. The chosen ones learn, along the way, that running from pain only increases suffering. But moving through it consciously is what allows for true spiritual healing. And healing here isn't about erasing the pain. It's about understanding its purpose. When you accept this spiritual pain as part of your journey, something within you awakens, not magically nor immediately, but profoundly. You begin to see beyond appearances. You begin to understand what lies behind the spiritual symptoms. What was once just a burden now reveals itself a stool for inner transformation, and you realize it's not broken, it's being refined. Acceptance doesn't erase the past, but it reconciles you with it. And this reconciliation is what allows you to walk more lightly. Not because the pain has disappeared, but because you're no longer held hostage by it. Carl Jung believed that when the soul is at peace with its shadow, it blossoms. And the blossoming of the soul makes no noise. It happens silently, within, inwardly, subtly, but it changes everything around it. Many try to silence this pain with distractions, with excessive rationality, with denial. But the chosen ones sooner or later understand. The soul doesn't want to be ignored. It wants to be recognized. It wants space. It wants a voice. And when you finally give your pain that space, it stops being a monster and transforms into spiritual messenger. It is she who leads you to your true purpose. And perhaps this is the turning point, realizing that the pain that seemed like a burden was actually a map back home, to yourself, to God. Because deep down, the chosen ones were not called to flee from pain, but to go through it, to illuminate it, to transform suffering into a path and the invisible into a mission. And when that happens, you don't just awaken, you inspire. Now that we've come this far, maybe you can look at your pain with different eyes. Perhaps you realize that she was never the end, but a beginning in disguise. an invitation from the soul, a silent call, a code that only the chosen can decipher. This pain that came out of nowhere was taking you to everything that you are. Deep spirituality begins when you stop denying what you feel and start listening. Your spiritual suffering is not weakness, it is strength in transition. Heightened sensitivity, intense empathy, deep emotional crisis. All of these are signs from the Spirit, calling out to you to awaken, integrate, transform. And now that you know, what are you going to do with it? Will you continue to ignore the call of your soul, or will you take the next step, even if you're afraid, even if you're not sure, and walk towards your spiritual mission? Only you can answer that. But one thing is certain, you are not alone. If at any point in this message you felt like it was describing something that even you couldn't explain, maybe it's because this pain was never just yours. Write in the comments, when was the last time you felt a nameless pain, the kind that seemed to come from nowhere, but weighed down like it was carrying the world? What you reveal here may be the courage another chosen one needs to realize they are not alone on this silent journey. If this message touched your soul in any way, please consider subscribing to the channel. Turn on notifications and leave a like. That way you help us bring light to other hearts that are still in the dark night of the soul. After all, the chosen ones also recognize themselves along the way.